Welcome to Pull or Pass After Dark. I'm Zach, and this week I spoke with Joe Glass about the Pride Season 2, his upcoming projects, and all things comics. So let's dive in. Hello, Joe Glass. How are you?
Hi, not too bad. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Dealing with bad weather, but pretty good.
It seems to be going around at us lately.
Yeah, it is that time of England, apparently. So just a few questions, mostly Pride related, but also about you and comics and everything. So first up, what got you into comics, both as a fan and a creator?
It's really hard to say because every time I think I've got like, oh, that was the first comic, I think like, no, wait, there was that.
Yeah.
I kind of, when my earliest memories of comics that I can say 100%, and this was probably my first comic, I went on a holiday in France with my parents when I was like 5 or 6 years old, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in this camping site. There wasn't like loads to do kind of thing. And like this was like the early 90s. So like internet was not a thing and all this. There was like nothing to do. And we were excitable kids getting bored. And there was this news agent kind of thing. And they had like loads of comics. And there was a Ghost Rider there. Now,
okay,
Ghost Rider is not a comic which people would generally associate with me, but my tiny little like 5-6-year-old brain saw this skull guy riding a flaming motorcycle and was like, I need this. So yeah, I picked that up, and that was probably the first comic book I ever read. And I was kind of always like a bit of a precocious kid and everything, so like liked reading, like knowing words which people would be not expecting someone of my age to know and stuff like that. So I loved reading comics because weirdly I picked up all kinds of things which I wasn't supposed to know at that age kind of thing. So that was my first comic, I think. It then became like a regular thing of me buying them. But it was mostly British comics. I bought a lot of Sonic the Comic, which it would take me decades later to learn that Mark Millar used to write that, of all people.
So weird to know, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I know. It's just like they were the most. To be fair, looking back at some of those Sonic stories, they were not mature, but they were like really quite complex for the reading age they were aiming at.
Yeah.
Which was like, oh, okay. But yeah, so that was kind of like the big thing. Sonic the Comic, but there's Sega properties which are part of that as well. And I read a lot of obviously here in the UK we have those reprints which would reprint like several Marvel issues in one book, so you'd have like Essential X-Men and things like that. And X-Men was the big one because obviously by that point the TV show was on.
Yeah.
And obviously I was addicted from get-go. So X-Men was my thing then, and like it was probably a little later that like pound shops and things like that were doing like 4 comics for £1, and it would always be X-Men back issues. I don't know why. It was just always various issues of X-Men or X-Factor or X-Force, and I just literally grabbed anything I could. And I wouldn't really call myself a collector at that point because although I was collecting and keeping them, I maybe wasn't keeping them in best condition, and they were very rarely in order. So I was literally just getting random bits of the story here and there, and just becoming obsessed with the characters and the designs. And I think from there, that's just where I kind of like fell in love with the medium. And obviously, once I was in love with the medium, the then idea of being part of that medium started growing stronger and stronger. Like, and I'll be honest, like at first I really wanted to be an artist.
Okay.
I'm terrible at art. If anyone has ever read the Pride one-page origin stories for the characters and the Angel one, which I drew, like, I'm terrible at art. I'm just not good. It's weird. Like I'm more right with a static image, but like a sequential artwork, I just suck so bad.
It's hard.
Oh, it's so hard. Like I thought it'd be like super easy because I like drawing, I like doing things, but it's like, tell a story in a drawing though. Oh my god. But I could tell a story. I can write. So like I knew I had those two things. They just didn't meet for me. So from there I became a writer, and obviously my main goal, because like as I was growing older and obviously came into my own realization of my own sexuality and identity, the big thing for me was just seeing that there was very little expressly like me. In comics, like everything was like either a metaphor or an analog, and I was just kind of like, well, why isn't anyone okay to just be like, hey, I'm gay, or whatever? So it kind of, when you do that, when it's always like an analog or something, it makes you feel like you're supposed to be in the closet, but you're not supposed to be known. That there is something wrong with being who you are, and that is in itself a wrong thing, because that is not the message you should give out to anyone. So like that was always my big thing. It's just like, I'm going to become a writer, and one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to tell the stories I wish I had growing up. And obviously felt like maybe I'll just wind up telling stories for just myself, but you know, we've kind of seen how things have gone so far, and it seems like I am telling stories which other people want to hear, I guess.
Yeah. Seems like it's going really well. I think a lot of people can relate to the Pride, and I think that's a really good thing. So let's talk about the Pride, why don't we? So Pride Season 2 was last year on Comixology, and the collection has come out on Comixology, I think, was it the end of January?
Yeah, towards the end of January, we released the whole Season 2 collection. So now they are all, I think, they're on there as just collections now as part of Comixology Original. Yeah. So it's Season 1 of the Pride and Pride Adventures, and then Season 2 of the Pride.
Yeah.
And the idea is that it'll eventually be part of their print-on-demand service as well.
Okay.
Soon, hopefully. Not too sure when that's going to happen. But yeah, we're hoping that for people who are really, really dead set against having digital versions and really want things in print, there will be an option. I'm not 100% on how it all works, but I'm sure that when we're ready, I'll know, and I'll be able to share all kinds of information then. And I'm hoping it's not too long now.
That was something I wanted to ask you about, because I got the Kickstarter for your first volume, so I know other people have asked me as well. So
it's good to know. A big thing. It's just like I get questions all the time about it in print, and it's weird because I get it, because I kind of prefer print to some extent myself. Like, I do love digital comics as well, but I think there's a lot that medium has to offer, which print comics can't replicate. And there's also another thing which, for me and for what the Pride became, and part of why I was looking to join Comixology Originals to continue the series, was Comixology, when I was self-publishing. Comixology was a big part in what got the Pride as far out as it did. At the end of the day, I'm making a little comic here in Wales. Like, I'm a small press, independent guy at that time. And it was very much a case of, I could print out so much, but I can still only get that so far. And like, with costs of shipping to different countries, it meant that it was limited how far I could reach. Whereas going through Comixology, where you don't have those printing concerns, you don't have the cost concerns of posting books out and everything.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, you've got like someone which is essentially connected to Amazon helping you. It does mean that you can reach a much greater audience. And seeing as the book is about spreading that message of positivity and inclusivity to people who maybe really need to hear it, being able to reach the widest audience possible was what appealed to me more than anything else. So although it meant that there's going to be a lot of people who are like, I really like print copies though, who aren't going to be able to get those, I was like, I totally understand, and I feel for you, but my main thing is I want this book to be read by everyone who needs it.
Yeah.
And if that means that I make less money, if that means that the book doesn't go into everyone's hands right away because they can't get a physical copy yet, then that's going to have to be fine, because there are loads of people who really can only afford digital or can only get digitally. Not to mention the fact that it's a lot more, for some people, safe to get them digitally, because like, you're not got something which is going to sit on your bookshelf and look super freaking gay. So there was a kind of swings and roundabouts kind of thing to it. The good thing with Comixology Originals is that they do have that print-on-demand service. And as the company continues to roll out with Comixology Originals and becomes bigger, then I'm sure that print-on-demand service is just going to get bigger and wider as well. So for me, like, obviously, that will happen. There will be, as soon as it does, I will be like saying it everywhere. So everyone just pay attention to my Twitter, like at Joseph Glass. You're not going to miss it. And I'll just talk about it when it's available. And basically, you just order the book. They'll print out a copy for you. I've seen the print-on-demand quality for the other books on Comixology Originals, and honestly, they're fantastic.
That's good.
They look great. You honestly wouldn't be able to tell that they're print-on-demand. They do look like they're a print run.
Okay, that's cool.
So yeah, it's good to know that you're going to get a good quality thing out of it as well. So stay tuned. There'll be news as soon as I have it, and hopefully you'll be able to get season 2 in print as well then.
Yeah, that's really cool. So about talking about season 2, I feel like so compared to the first season, I feel like it's there's been some changes. You've got a consistent artist for the full 6 issues, and I don't know, it feels like a more confident season, I guess, because everything's been established and you can kind of really do anything now that you've got the universe and the characters of the core team. Would you agree with that? Do you think it's...
Yeah, I'd say that's accurate. Certainly, when I initially tried to do Pride Season 1, back when it was self-published and everything, the initial goal was that we would have a consistent art team throughout, which is probably all evidenced by the fact that obviously the first 2 issues we ever did were both drawn by Gavin Mitchell.
Yeah.
And the idea was that we would actually probably have Gavin draw throughout. But self-publishing,
it's hard work.
Doesn't always work out that way. People got bills to pay, mouths to feed, so it meant that sometimes Gav would have to go somewhere else. I didn't necessarily want to have to wait forever to get another issue out, so that's when we started opening up and getting other artists on board, and it worked in a way which I really appreciate and really love, because it meant that the Pride, when it started, being a book about a community, became a community making it.
Yes.
And it was nice to see all these different artists with their different interpretations and everyone having a little spin on it, and just becoming like this broad mix of people from all over the world being part of the book. So that was awesome. But obviously I knew that like one of those, you always get someone who's going to be like, oh, there's a different artist every time I'm in it.
Yeah.
So like one of the things I wanted to do with the second season was I did want to try and have a consistent team. That would be throughout, and again, that's something which I could only really do Comixology originals. If I was going self-publish and trying to tell a 6-issue story arc again, then it would have been the same. It would have been probably different arcs every issue, whoever was free, whoever was in budget. Whereas with the help of Comixology originals, it meant I had that support structure to be like, hey, we're going to stick to this, we're all going to focus, and we're all going to get this whole thing out as a single team. And in terms of the story, it's probably a little true as well, but it's a bit more confident as well, because a lot of it's set up. The characters are introduced. We had, by that point, created them as more than just the analogs that they clearly were. Because that was a big part of what I was basing on, was the playing with stereotypes and playing with the analog idea. So making something which a new reader could see and be like, oh, I kind of know who that is immediately. And then playing with it a little bit and twisting it a little bit and just giving them a more sense of, oh, right, but this character's different. This is why they're different. And it being more than just like, oh, because they're queer. So, by the time we got into season 2, the team's all set up. The world is established. There's a lot more to the universe than I've actually had time to and space to actually put in to the book as yet. There's stuff which has been hinted at, which in my mind is stuff which is like long term. Because basically, for me, like a lot of the comics I used to read when I was younger, and which I really loved and stuff, was like Uncanny X-Men and X-Men stuff. And obviously you'd have storylines which were building up over years before they culminated, and sometimes across multiple titles. So you'd have like the Onslaught saga or Age of Apocalypse and the build up to that and everything, and all that stuff is like, we look back now and it looks like it happened immediately, but when you were reading, it was happening everywhere. And it felt like, and it was connecting to everything. And there's a lot of stuff like that I tried to build into the Pride. So there's stuff which I've loosely hinted at, which will probably pay off in hopefully a season 3 or 4 or 5, or we'll see. But it's meant that having that support coming and essentially going from self-publishing with a project to a company that was just like, hey, we want to help you make it. It meant that it gave me that confidence to just be like, hey, so I can really start pushing with this and start building the world so that as if it's going to stick around kind of thing. So I'd say there's definitely been a lot more confidence in what we did with season 2.
I think as well, so there's a lot of new characters introduced in season 2. And I think it's a good variety to build on what you already have with the core team. I feel like you're slowly kind of covering all the superhero universe kind of standards. You've got the Speedster character and the Doctor Strange-esque Constantine. Welshman.
I had to get a Welsh hero in there somewhere. So.
It's going to happen sooner or later. But yeah, I think it's a good extension of the team, and I think it is something that happens with all superheroes. Eventually, you do need more of them, and there's always a lot of them. I did actually want to ask as well, so for the first season of the Pride, we also had the adventures, which kind of tied in and expanded on some of the characters. Are you planning to do any Pride adventures for season 2, or are you just seeing what happens?
I'd love to. I've got lots of little ideas on what I would do with short stories.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, the one thing I loved doing with Pride Adventures was getting other creators involved.
Yeah.
So, and not just other artists, I mean like other writers. So like having Mike Garley and PJ Montgomery and Cena Grace write stories has been awesome. It's been nice to see someone else take these characters
of course.
and play with them. I mean, like the dream is one day, but like when I'm finally said everything I've got to say with the Pride, I'm not averse to someone else taking over.
Okay, that's cool.
So like we'll see what happens when that happens, kind of thing. But yeah, for a Pride Adventures, I'd love to do more. I don't know where we stand on anthology books with Comixology originals or anything, but like maybe like we'll see what we can do. I've certainly got ideas of what I'd like to do with a Pride season 3, which might involve anthology-esque elements if I get to do it.
Okay. I hope you do. It would be nice to get more. Yeah. And it is interesting to talk about other creators and how they would work with the Pride and the individual characters. It would be interesting to see. I mean, I love what you've done, but it is curious to see what someone else would bring to that and other people's points of view. And I think it's something that obviously we see with big superhero companies. We see different people have different takes on everyone all the time. So it's constantly interesting and sometimes a bit weird.
Yeah. Plus, as well as that, with a book which is about the LGBTQIA community and everything, I'm obviously only going to represent one element of that, or potentially two. You know, whereas there are other people who can really speak to the experience of the other elements of that spectrum.
Yeah, that's true.
So having more writers and creators who maybe can add that influence in will only help in a series which is about the community and about the inclusivity and broadness of the spectrum of identity.
Very true. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, the Pride is very diverse and very representative. You saw the review I wrote. I think that's two things that are at the very forefront of this.
It's what we aim for, and hopefully always will strive to keep it going as well.
Yeah. So this is going to sound like a late realization from me. So I realized with Volume 2 that everything is named after different Lady Gaga songs. Yes.
And you're actually the first person to mention it. I don't think anyone's brought it in a review or interview before. The tracks kind of played an inspirational role in how the story played out. Yeah, it's something that I obviously realized pretty early on, and then only afterwards realised, and so are some of the chapters of the first volume as well. And now I feel like I can't believe I'd missed that. But it's an interesting one. And I did, when I was back in university, I did a project about music and comics and how the relationship exists between the two. So just wanted to ask you about music and how you feel that relates to your comic book writing, and if it plays much of a part in it, or if it's just being a big Lady Gaga fan. Music as a whole plays a part. Like I'd say that I listen to a lot of music when I'm writing, and sometimes it inspires scenes and ideas for what I want to do. Like it sounds weird. Like before I started writing my first comics, I used to like sit and listen to various tracks. I think it was probably Placebo at the time, and I'd be coming up with like music videos in my head. And it's sort of like then became translating those into comics, because sometimes it'd be like creating an action sequence which fit the music or stuff like that. Now, obviously, I can't get that to happen in the comic because sadly we don't yet exist in the future where comics play music.
Maybe one day though.
Somehow like at the speed rate which people read. I don't know how it worked, but they were interesting.
That was my original plan for my university final project. That's what I said I was going to try and do, and very quickly realized you can't do that.
Can't be done. Like, as much as I would love to, but so like often I sometimes even think of ways to incorporate what it was which was inspiring me. Mm-hmm. Now, certainly with the first season of the Pride, all the of the main series, the issue titles were all queer anthems, or gay anthems, I guess. So things which were heavily linked to the gay scene, and like, every gay guy is supposed to know this song and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, you'd have like one of the issue titles is "Don't Rain on My Parade," and there's "I Think You're a Man," which is based on the Divine song, and just stuff like that. And then obviously season 2 was about the dangers of fame. Mm-hmm. And obviously Lady Gaga did an album called Fame Monster, which includes tracks like Paparazzi, and I was like, oh well, this just fits perfectly. So yeah, very much became creating the story around and fitting them around the tracks on that album as an inspiration to what was happening in that particular issue. Another idea I always had sometimes maybe is like maybe having a character one day who like listens to music a lot, and sometimes having his track listing coming up. Or something like a little like a caption box, but this is what he's listening to right now, kind of thing. But I don't know how that will work. But it's something to maybe play with in the future. Yeah,
I have spoken to other people, other creators about the using soundtracks to fit with it and releasing playlists. So yeah, I think it's something that is happening more and more, and it is interesting to me to how people relate the two.
I toyed with releasing a Spotify playlist, but then I thought, like, you know what, Kieran does it, and he does it way better than I can. So I'm like, I can't just copy Kieran all the time. So yeah, it's just I'll maybe one day I'll create a Spotify playlist. Maybe I should just do a whole Spotify playlist, which is just the Pride, and it's just all the tracks I listen to, and even ones which don't get named in the books, because there's definitely things. There are things I listen to now, and I'm like, oh, that is so that character. Like, I'm very much addicted right now to Doja Cat, and her track "Boss Bitch" from the Harley Quinn film, or Birds of Prey film rather. And oh my god, I keep on, every time I listen to that, I'm just like, oh, this is like that character. Yeah, I need to bring that up somehow. So there's a lot of music which still even now informs the things I intend to write, kind of thing, or intend to make, which haven't been announced yet, kind of thing.
Yeah, of course. So I did have a conversation. So I thought, as preparation, I talked to some other people I know who've read The Pride and kind of see what they wanted to know from you, and get some input from other people. And one of the first
case of fan questions.
Yeah,
I'm definitely
got fans. I know it's one of those crazy things. It's like people enjoyed this and they have questions. So one of the questions, and this is something I hadn't thought of, and it's really difficult to phrase as a question, so bear with me.
Okay.
So the name The Pride obviously relates to pride. Mm-hmm. Was it intentional that it also relates to pride as in a group of, well, lions traditionally, but which is something I'd never thought of until someone mentioned it. So was that an intentional?
No, I'll actually be honest, it's not. It was just a case of what it actually links to is back in my day in university. So we're talking like, God, years ago now, because I'm an old man. But yeah, like we had like the Aberystwyth LGB group. And this was before they were added with T, and there was a very much strong discussion about adding with T. And looking back, like I'm very annoyed about conversation, because it should have just been the case that this wasn't a conversation, just add the T. We had trans members, they should be there.
Yeah.
But the decision that was decided to go for in the end, because we didn't want it to keep on they didn't want to keep on adding letters all the time, which I always hate that excuse, but there we go. Was they changed the name to Aber Pride, which was basically to eventually have that connection to a Pride event and be a more inclusive term. So without having to like specifically go through every person we are saying that this group is for. Particularly seen as like the way we were very much a integrationist group in my university, so it was very much a case of like allies were entirely welcome, but I very much don't think they came very often, but they were definitely welcome. So I think the idea was like if we just named every sexuality, then they would almost seem like there's almost no point for group. So I think the decision in the end was they called it ABBA Pride. And that's kind of where the name came from. Then I was just trying to think, like, what am I going to name this team of queer superheroes? And I just did the same decision. I just called it the Pride because I thought it was an inclusive word. The idea of what a Pride event is meant to be is that it's inclusive for everyone. I know that that's not always the case. And I know that there are people who have issues with Pride events and everything. And they're totally right to. But the ideal of what a Pride should be is inclusive and for everyone, and positive and safe. And that was what I wanted to portray with the team. So it just fit then. The Pride of Lion things didn't hit me until someone brought it up at a con, maybe after like 2 issues in. And I was like, well, no, I didn't really think of that. But yeah, I guess. But then obviously my biggest thing was the fact that Marvel had essentially a team called the Pride. Granted, a team of supervillains and they didn't have their own book kind of thing. So I was very concerned that all of a sudden I might get some cease and desist from Marvel at some point. But to be honest, they, under their editorial, they knew about the book from pretty much the get-go and they did not seem to care. So good. I'm just like, that's fine. I'm hoping that they never decide that they're going to do a Pride book after all.
Yeah, it feels pretty late in the Runaways game to now decide with a real Pride comic. But
I mean, that being said, I always argue that just like, yeah, maybe they could, but at the end of the day, how do you trademark the word Pride? You know, like,
it's
what you're going to do then? Just be like, oh, none of you queer events can call yourselves Pride anymore because we made a comic book. It's like, no, come on.
That does seem like a real challenge, just like going around to everyone like, you can't say Pride anymore, we're using it.
Yeah, but then Disney, you know.
Yeah, true. Disney might just buy everyone out. You never know.
I mean, don't they own the rights to Happy Birthday? I can't remember. Not that we're going to sing it because, trademark.
Yeah, surreal, but yeah. So that was a question that had never occurred to me, but there we go. Another one we got was, which member of the Pride do you most identify with?
Batman. Like, I can answer it hands down.
Yeah.
I always used to have a think about it. And do you know, at different points in my life, it probably would be different characters. Like when I was a younger gay, a younger confused and not entirely as with it as he should be gay, I would probably have said Wolf because he's very much masculine and everything. I'm just like, Joe, you are not masculine. But at that time, like, I used to do that whole thing of like, oh, I don't want to necessarily be visibly gay because, and now I'm just like, why? Why should I care what anyone thinks about and what I didn't like wearing dark clothes all the time and stuff. So he says wearing a black t-shirt.
Yeah.
But so yeah, like anyone who's seen me at Comic-Con now sees me wearing like flamboyant, loud outfits looking like the Elton John of comics. And it's because that's who I am. I like being loud. I like feeling comfortable in my skin to do whatever I want to do and look however way I want to look. And that is very much Fab Man. And I relate to him a lot now. Even more so that we've revealed that for all the good Fab Man wants to do and how positive he aims to be, he has a habit of putting his foot in his mouth.
He does.
And I do that all the time. I'm terrible for it. And I hate it. And it's one of those things like I always try and be better. And it still happens. So, Fab Man is more or less me. I will never look as buff as he does, but I could still rock those pink hot pants, I'm telling you.
I don't doubt that, especially with the cape, That's now that's you do bring up Wolf as well, which we do see in this kind of public coming out of Wolf, despite the unpublic coming out. Now, I'm not sure the best way to phrase that, but which is interesting. So I guess we do see characters like Wolf at different points in their journey, and so I can understand that. You would relate to Wolf at some points, and then Fab Man later on, and. Maybe it's an evolution through the Pride.
Yeah, I mean, like even like characters like Twink is probably very much like I probably was when I was coming out and first joining queer groups and sort of being to be myself amongst a group of people like me kind of thing. Frost is very much like me in the self, but I can be a very private person, and I'm very as loud and colourful and everything which I am. Things which are very personal to me and which and like my emotions and things, I can sometimes play very close to my chest, and Frost is very much like that. So I'd say the thing with all of the Pride characters is probably a little bit of me in all of them. But it's also a lot of them are based on people I know. So whenever you get someone who does decide that they're going to be a negative Nelly and be all like, oh, yeah, they aren't even like real people, blah, blah, blah. I'm just like, well, they're kind of based on people I actually know. So maybe try to help me back.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, it's interesting. I'd say there's probably a little bit of me in everyone. But yeah, Batman's definitely me, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So the final question we got was, so a lot of the characters, well, yeah, a lot of the characters, most of the characters, have, as you mentioned earlier, have got kind of a queer twist on a mainstream superhero or a reimagined version of a mainstream superhero. What made you choose the characters you chose, both in the original team and in the second wave season 2 teams?
When I was initially coming up with the concept of the Pride, it was very much about playing with analogues of what superheroes are. And the biggest analogues are obviously the core trinity of DC. So you've got your Superman, your Batman, your Wonder Woman. And then from there, I kind of also wanted to play with the superhero archetypes as they journeyed through the publication history of comic books. So it then became people with more conceptual powers. So you had Angel, who's got that power of confusion, which is like telepathy, but not telepathy, and like illusionary, but not illusionary, and kind of just playing with like a very bizarre postmodern concept power, which is much more like of a kind of Doom Patrol archetype than anything else. And then like just sort of go through that sort of history of archetypal superhero models that have existed throughout pretty much comics. When it became season 2, it was very much a case of my main thought was, okay, we've done this big step in queer representation in comics, but there's still a lot more to do. And one of the other things I wanted to do was be very intersectional, because while I was aware that, I've done a lot for adding a lot of gay men characters, a lot of there's a trans character, there was a case of just, but the team is primarily white still. And I had to look back and to think that, like, if I got the chance to do over the Pride, I would probably have made some different decisions on some of those characters.
Okay, yeah.
But as it stands, like, I was like, well, I can't do that now, but I'm going forward, so I can bring that in now. So for me, at that point, the core decision with season 2 was actually what other elements of representation did I need to bring in to really show how diverse the community is, but also how diverse the world is. And that involved not just having a trans male character and not just having an intersex character and an asexual character, but also having characters who were neurally diverse as well, characters who were disabled, characters who were black, or other ethnicities as well. And so that became a focus on the second season. And then in terms of like what kind of superpowers they got, that became very secondary. What I really wanted to tell with that person. But the main thing I did look at was like, what kind of power sets am I missing in your team? So like the fact that we have a speedster, the fact that we have a near godlike quantum level hero kind of thing, all that kind of stuff was just a case of like, we're missing these a magic hero. Of course, that was the big one. I was like, I have no magic characters in this world. I hadn't even fully established that there is magic in this world as yet. So I was just like, these things need to get touched on to sort of broaden out the world a bit more. And then they just fit in with the characters as they were, as I kind of needed them.
Yeah, I think that's understandable. It does go a long way with representation with the new cast of characters. So that is understandable, and then choosing the powers afterwards makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
it was weird because it's like almost season 1 the powers came first. Season 2 the powers came after. It was the character first and then the powers, and then so it was a weird. I'd say that a lot of the new cast of characters, although they have similar power sets, maybe to existing characters, they're a lot less archetypes. Whereas season 1, they're very much archetypes. And the idea of that was that this is a new story, but it was going to be a 6-part story. And I wanted people to feel like not put off, that they could pick up issue 1 and be like, I kind of know who these are already. Even though we would play with what those representations are and like what they were as a stereotype or whatever. But they would go in thinking like, oh, that guy's kind of a Superman. I kind of get his deal already. But then explore that in a different way, you know?
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And there were some characters. So obviously you've got characters like Hyperon, who it's kind of the Dr. Manhattan vibes. And we've got Dewey James, who's the Constantine style. But then, you do have characters like Otter and Hub, who are a little bit more unrecognizable as previous characters, I suppose. Yeah,
I'd say like for them, it just felt like I wanted to have a nice what's the word I'm looking for? Not the main cast, but like the background cast who are there. Like, so they're,
supporting cast.
Yeah, supporting cast. Yeah, a nice supporting cast of characters, because even after season 1 was over, there wasn't really much in the way of a supporting cast network for the characters. So having a few characters who will pop up now and again, who are friends of the Pride and who are part of the team, but like in a not on the field kind of way.
Yeah.
It felt important to have that kind of character. But it didn't feel like they needed to be any archetype. The one thing with Otter was actually just a personal challenge, though, because obviously the first season of the Pride, and does it happen in the second season? No, just the first season. A lot of the characters' superhero code names are queer terms. So like you've got Cub, you've got Bear, you've got Wolf, and they're actually like gay subsection terms.
Yeah.
And it was just because they sound like superhero names to me.
Yeah.
But I didn't have an otter. And I was just like, how do you do an otter superhero? So I then just came up with a supporting cast character and just had the idea that it's a nickname.
Yeah.
Coming purely from the fact that, for one, he is technically in gay terms an otter. But also the fact that when he gets something like he gets very excited about, he looks like an otter with a glam. So,
yeah, which, works.
Yeah, and I was just like, hey, I finally did it. I challenged myself. I got that otter in there.
Looking forward to seeing what challenges will lie ahead. So, yeah, that's fair. One of the things that one of my friends brought up regarding the kind of relation with characters to being archetypes was that Wolf, in his kind of first appearance with Fabman in Pride season 1, is very reminiscent of Hugh Jackman in the first X-Men film.
Yeah.
And just if that was intentional because Hugh Jackman or just coincidental because Hugh Jackman.
Little bit. It was a case of when we were like designing the character, I was kind of saying like, oh, I want something like he's kind of the Batman of the group, but kind of also wanting to be a little Wolverine.
Yeah.
And obviously at the time we were creating the Pride, like X-Men 1 was out and probably X-Men 2 was coming out, I think.
Okay. Yeah,
like when we were first putting it together, like we're talking way back when now. No, actually, no, can't be that long ago. A bunch of X-Men films must have been out. But anyway, Hugh Jackman was a known quantity at that point.
Yeah.
So, I'd have to ask Gav, but like, I'd probably say that, he probably fell into there design-wise a little bit.
Which makes sense. It suits him.
Yeah. And it was also kind of a way of wanting to, that introduction scene was wanting to show the polar opposite ideas of what a gay man can be. You have that flamboyant gay guy that was very much the stereotype, which people can be super negative about, but do you know what? It exists out there, and be the first one you meet, but also then final scene of that comic be this other gay guy who kind of does not present in any of the stereotypical ways that a gay guy is supposed to represent, and also had come on hard times because of his sexuality being put out there. Yeah. I mean, but the idea of the first season was obviously that they're all kind of treated not great because of their sexuality. But like he was a big superhero. Like he was part of what was essentially our Justice League Justice Division in the world of the Pride. then got kicked out on a don't ask, don't tell policy because he was too friendly with a flamboyantly gay man.
Yeah.
And just like, which, spoilers, sorry, if you haven't read Pride, but yeah, go read it. Don't ask, don't tell is kind of not a thing anymore, but it's also kind of is. So yeah, still relevant. But yeah, that was kind of what I wanted to show with that introduction scene, was like, there's probably definitely a bit of Hugh Jackman in him, having someone who's a bit more gruff and masculine presenting and everything, but it was also about showing the broadness of the spectrum of what a gay man is. Because like, if you also had Twink in that scene, and Twink kind of falls somewhere in between. So it was kind of showing that a gay man isn't just one thing. Which was probably why also there's about 5 gay men in the original setup of the Pride.
To show that variety.
Yeah, to show that variety. Yeah. Like, so whenever I get that criticism coming from certain quarters, but like, oh, he's just done these really faggy superheroes and all this, because of course we're going to use a term like that. It's just like, hang on, you've not read the book. There's 5 gay guys, and they all act completely different from the other. So
yeah, of course. Yeah, very much in the first season, it is noticeable that you kind of covered that spectrum of different kinds of gay men, different personalities, which works well. And I think it's only developed as it's gone on that there's more representation, more diverse.
Yeah, it's nice seeing that in mainstream comics. Yeah, it's nice seeing in mainstream comics since I started as well, but there's been a bit more diversity in how queer men are represented as well. Because certainly one of the main pushbacks, which was for having Fab Man being the first one that you see, and being like the flamboyant stereotype and everything, was because for the longest time it felt like if you did have a gay man in a mainstream comic book, they had to be anything but flamboyant. You could not have a camp character. You could not have someone who dresses well or anything like that. They had to be straight acting, and I hated that because A, I'm not, and B, there are lots of queer men who are not, and C, it's kind of misogynistic in a way, because you kind of think like any guy who acts too much like a girl is like wrong, and I'm just like, that's just not fair. And it's kind of a thing of like I want to push back against. And I mean, we still get it now. I mean, because you've got a character like Bunker at DC. When he's first introduced, he was clearly based on Kurt from Glee. Like he dresses like him. Like the first time you see him, he looks like Kurt from Glee. He's pretty flamboyant. He makes musical and pop culture references, and he's clearly meant to be that kind of gay. And then he sort of went away for a little while, and he's come back. And I think like most recent comeback he's had, he's gone like really dark and kind of grim, and he's kind of like not so much of that flamboyant character that he used to be. And I'm just like, why? What's happened? Like granted, there's probably story reasons or whatever, but it just felt like that's a bit of a loss, because we didn't have an awful lot of that representation in mainstream comics, and you've just taken one of our few characters and just made him another straight acting gay. Thankfully, the closest I think we've got at the moment is probably Wiccan, because he's still pretty campish. He's not super camp, he's not super flamboyant, but he's got that aspect to him. Like he's not super masculine either. And I love that about him. It's one of my favorite parts of that character, that he's not played super butch to counter the fact that he's also very gay. But yeah, I can't remember how I waffled onto that, but I somehow waffled onto it.
I think that's fair. It does seem like something that both Marvel and DC have improved with over the last few years, but I think still have a long way to work around and develop. But to go to the mainstream kind of Marvel and DC question, are there any Marvel or DC characters that you would like to write?
Oh God, so many. Like I would adore to work on various big 2 properties. I think it's pretty clear I want to write X-Men. Like I want to be.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, I mean, like I think everyone who follows me on Twitter can see that. It's just like, yeah, I want to write X-Men. That's never been a secret. It's always been the dream and the goal that I would get to write an X-Men book someday. There are a number of characters I love to have a play with, and not just like queer characters, like or to turn them queer or anything like that. Like some people might try and think might be my goal. but there's loads of characters I just want to tell stories with. Like, I've got a great Kid Devil story in my head I want to do someday.
Okay.
Like, if DC ever want to give me that chance, like, it could probably even be a Black Label book. I'd be up for it. So I'm just like, yeah, I've got. That's my one thing. I love obscure characters.
I can relate to that.
And that seems to be a hard thing. Like, if you want to work for the big two, you got to want to write like Wolverine. I'm just like, nah, doesn't interest me. Laura Kinney Wolverine, however, that I could write.
Yeah.
Logan, though,
this is weird. I had a conversation. So for our like weekly show, we reviewed Wolverine, which will be out now. I realize it's Saturday. So we discussed Wolverine all through that. I was talking about, but Laura Kinney though, that's my Wolverine now. And I don't. It's just like I don't need Logan.
It's like, don't get me wrong. Logan's the Wolverine I grew up with. Logan's the Wolverine I know, but I feel like I've had that Wolverine for so long. I know everything about him now. And he's become not boring, but like he's become a little predictable. Whereas Laura Kinney, when Tom Taylor was writing that run of Wolverine and her as Wolverine, it just felt so fresh and so new. It's one of those weird things with because I had this recent discussion because I've been trying to open and broaden my horizons by watching a bit more anime. I tried to get into Naruto because like I was fully aware that this was one of those things where loads of people I see at Comic-Cons really love Naruto. There's loads of Naruto cosplay, and like Naruto is very much part of the conversation, but I was very much like, I don't get it, I don't know it. So because I was just the wrong generation, I guess. I just missed it, you know. And I tried watching it. I tried watching a couple of the episodes from right at the beginning, and I really didn't like it. Like I couldn't get into it. And then someone suggested try Boruto, which is like the next generation.
Kind of,
And I loved it. I watched the whole thing and the movie, and I absolutely adore Boruto. But I couldn't get on with Naruto. And like I had a interesting query then was just like, do people in manga anime get as upset when the next generation or new character essentially replaces the original hero, like in comics? Because like whenever, and it's obviously particularly bad lately when we get a female character replacing a traditionally male character or a person of color. And sections of the comics fandom go apoplectic whenever that happens, and I'm just like, does that happen in other media? And like it seems to be like not so much. And I'm just like, it's kind of weird that we do that. Like so I loved that Laura Kinney Wolverine run, but like it was one of those things where like I always knew Logan was coming back, because there's no way
at some point.
No way comics would stand for that traditional movement forwards that other mediums do. Because it baffles me, because I get why they can sometimes go like, oh yeah, but people love that character. It's just like, but that character's not disappeared. His books are still out there. But yeah.
It's one of those things where when Wolverine came back, I felt like I couldn't get too annoyed about it because we also got Cyclops back, and I'm a really big Cyclops fan. So
this is true. Like it did mean we got Slight back too, and it meant also Chamber reappeared in the book, and he's one of my favorite characters. So it's just like, I'm not going to complain.
Like we have to be okay with it because we're getting all the X-Men back, so I guess it's okay. But
like for me, like I'm an obscure character guy, so like obviously my big one, I want to write Pixie. I want to write a Pixie book.
I can see that.
So hard, Marvel, give me that damn Pixie book. Let a Welshman write the Welsh hero for a change. I've got this awesome idea of what I would do with Pixie. One day, hopefully. I've also got a really great Captain Britain story in my head, but that being said, like bits of it might get touched on now by the Union, which we've just announced. So we'll see.
We will. It is interesting. I think the obscure characters have always appealed to me. I think when I got into DC properly, it was when 52 was coming out, like the follow-up to Infinite Crisis. So I was immediately drawn to all these like Booster Gold and Blue Beetle and characters that I then learned nobody really cared about that much. So you'll go years without anyone mentioning Blue Beetle, and it's like, oh yeah, cool, you care that he's there now, great. But that's I think that was the thing for me when I got into comics, was there was so much like Shadow Pact and spin-offs from all the events that were happening that were so odd and obscure and now have been gone for Oh God, 10 years. Time has passed, but I can understand. I think it's interesting because a lot of the creators that I speak to always seem drawn to these kind of obscure and lesser used characters. I interviewed Steve Horry a couple of months ago, and I know his Justice League has always been Justice League International, which no one has cared about since the 90s, really. So seems like a common thing with British creators, at least.
Yeah, we all like the oddballs. We all like the ones like who are barely ever there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Because
and plus,
we all
like, got one comic
characters who maybe were in one issue, and you're like, yeah, but they visually look so interesting. I just want to do something with them. So yeah, that's always the ones I've been drawn to the most. Like, it's just characters who haven't had much story to tell yet. Yeah, I suppose that's the other thing. Is like, because when you've got an obscure character like that, you've more or less got a clean slate.
Yeah, you can.
If you take on Superman, like, everyone's told a Superman story. Everyone, like, there's probably every kind of Superman story you can imagine out there. So you kind of feel like, oh, right, so how do I tell something different with this character? And granted, all you got to do is just realize, like, what do you want to say with them? Because no one's going to tell what you want to say with that character. So, you would find your way through there. But in terms of, like, trying to come at it from a case of, like, oh, right, so what have they not done? And what kind of story have they not appeared in with a character who's got, like, 80 years of publication history and has appeared in nearly every book that's come out every week since then?
Probably uncovered.
Not an awful lot you can probably do. You've probably
it's true.
You know? Whereas, like, a character like Penance, like, there's nothing done with her beyond, like, the basic stories. So you kind of feel like there's so much I could do with that. That's such an interesting blank slate to play with. And maybe not have quite so confusing as being two children who are actually one adult, who are actually whatever that madness turned out to be. I
understand that, and I look forward to the Joe Glass Pixie comic. I like to think we'll get that one day.
I mean, Jordan, hit me up. Like, I'm here. I'm like, I can get that ball. Just throw it my way.
Imagine it's like you've already got it written. It's ready to go.
I mean, there are Marvel pitches which are written. Like, I mean, some of them are like have been pitched before, but I've got things sitting in my pocket. Like, I've got ideas. Like, I just need someone to throw me the ball.
Yeah, that's fair. So to move on to different projects and different pitches. So the most accessible comics from you that aren't the pair that I could find were both Stiffs and Acceptable Losses. So I just wanted to talk to you about those and any other projects that you've worked on that aren't available on Comixology right now.
There's actually nothing else which I've done. And nothing else in terms of which isn't available on Comixology or anything. Stiffs was actually a co-written project between me and PJ Montgomery and Drew Davis, which was also drawn by Gavin Mitchell. And we got 3 issues through it, and it was a story I'm still intensely proud of. I think we were telling a really fun, really quirky, dark humor kind of horror tale. Which I think had a lot of strength to it, but like, the fans it did have were super fans. Like, they loved it, and like, they would always be talking about it and always ask when the next issue's coming. But it was just unfortunately one of those things which didn't quite pan out. Like, it didn't have the level of success that it needed for us to continue it going. So obviously me and PJ then focused on other ventures, as did Gavin, and Drew kind of left the idea of writing comics entirely, because he had other things to focus on, like, because life exists too. Like, we are also paying bills and doing jobs and getting careers, so like, it was just one of those things which sadly never finished. One day maybe I'd love to finish it. Like, obviously we'd all have to want to finish it. It's all written. Literally, there are only 2 more issues. It was a 5-issue mini. It was supposed to be. So there's only 2 more issues, and like, I'd love to release them someday, but unfortunately, like, it's hard to release something which has like 200 people who read it. Like,
it's a
because that's not enough to afford to pay an artist to draw it. So it's one of those things where, like, I loved it personally, and the fans who did like it evidently loved it, but unfortunately, it just didn't really go anywhere. The reason I liked it most, I think, was because it was a collaborative writing project.
Yeah.
And I really love the collaborative writing project. But also the issue in particular that I wrote was very different to anything I was doing in Pride.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because, it was much more of a dark comedy tale, which is very much my sense of humor. So it was very perfect. And then obviously Acceptable Losses then was the first solo written comic which wasn't Pride.
Yes.
By me. And that just kind of stemmed from, it's superheroes again, kind of.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a case of like giving myself that personal challenge of I want to show where I could do something different from the Pride in that, it's not the same kind of colorful, bright superheroes kind of thing. It's not super positive. It's kind of grim and gritty, which normally I push back against, but just be like, can I do grim and gritty? So that's the challenge I want to have is like, can I do grim and gritty? Can I do a more political story? Can I do a Captain America story? Was essentially part of it. So that's why you have this Captain America-esque analog kind of character, this kind of national military superhero kind of thing, and tell back a story involving complex views on the way we fight back against terrorism, and the violence that inevitably involves, and how that violence doesn't necessarily solve anything. If not anything, actually continue to exacerbate the problem. So it was just kind of Acceptable Losses was that it was the first thing I was going to do after Pride, which I knew, and it was just like I want to show that I can do something else, and challenge myself as much as anything else. So that's where that sort of came born from. But I also knew that it was like one of those things where I wanted to do something which was self-contained. Like I knew, because it's self-published again, doing a 6-issue arc or something like that self-published is pretty difficult. So I wanted to tell a story which is all there, has scope that if we did decide, and if it was successful enough, that we wanted to tell more in that world, we could. But essentially that could be all we write, and that'll be it, and it'll be fine. So that's kind of where Acceptable Losses came in.
I think between all three titles is quite a diverse mix. They're all very different books. And I think, Acceptable Losses does show that you can do grim and gritty, and Stiff shows that you can do Welsh zombie horror, comedy horror. So
that's always one of the things that I've had people say, but like, oh, maybe with Stiffs it was too niche in that it was set in Wales, and I'm just like, not because it's the main thing about it's a fictional Welsh Valley for one thing. But it's also a case of just like, you got Gavin and Stacey, and Gavin and Stacey is pretty popular in America, so they get Welsh. But then there's also the element of the main thing you needed to know going into that book was they came from a town which was once a coal mining town, which no longer exists, and therefore has all kind of fallen on hard times, and they're all in shitty jobs now trying to make ends meet. And I'm just like, everyone can relate to that. Like, that's not just the South Wales Valleys things. That's not that niche. There's a lot of people around the world that can relate to that idea. So I was always kind of surprised that it just didn't seem to get the full audience that it should have. Because honestly, if you ask me, like, Stiffs really should have been huge. It should have been doing stellar numbers, and I'll be honest, it probably should have gotten all the creative team on that book further than it ever did. Which is a shame, because like I said, we all loved it. We would all love to finish it. We all had ideas for where it would go if it continued. Like, we had probably like a 5-year plan set out for how that series would go. But it just became too hard to manage on the success that it did have. Because like I say, it had success. It wasn't an unsuccessful book. It just didn't have the level of success that you need to persist with it. Which was a shame. And like I say, it was also possibly making that mistake of any new comic creator going in and trying to tell a long form story. If I was to go back and start my comic career right now, I would probably be like, I'd probably do one shots and just do one shots for a while.
I think that makes sense.
Because it's so hard to do a 6-issue arc off your own back. So it's one of those things I look back on with regret, but not because of anything we did. Stiffs, I just regret that it didn't do better than it did. Like, because I loved that story, and I really think that it should have done a lot better than it did.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I read it this week, and I read Acceptable Losses, and I really enjoyed both of them. So
Well, I'm glad you enjoyed them.
and I would like to see an end to Stiff, so I hope one day that does come together.
Fingers crossed. Like, we've often like talked about the idea of like how we would approach it, and how to give it a completion.
Yeah,
It's one of those things now where it's been so long, because I think it's been about 5 or 6 years, I think, since the third issue came out.
which is quite a while.
So it's been like a huge gap. So like even the audience we had probably isn't even there anymore. Excuse me. So it's one of those things where like everyone's kind of moved on. Everyone's kind of doing their own different things. So it's something we'd love to see happen, but it would be so weird to do, because I mean, if nothing else, it would just be that weird element of like Gav's art style has changed in that time. You know, like he's continued to progress. When he was drawing Stiffs back in the day, he was still using traditional pen and ink and everything. Now he's pretty much solely digital. So like it's hard to think, but like sometimes you don't think that's a huge difference, because all comics have kind of done that.
It is noticeable next to each other, yeah.
So it's weird. We'd love to like
hold out for the Stiffs Pride crossover.
Oh god, yeah.
Zombie Pride.
That idea at one point, and we were just like, I really don't know how that would work, but like, yeah, we could. Maybe one day.
Just bring the Pride in to resolve a zombie invasion in Wales. That's doable.
Massive sense, you know, because I was going to say, because that regularly happens. I was like, yeah, because zombies regularly happen. I mean, it feels like it around here sometimes, but.
So moving on then to any projects you've got coming up, will we get a Pride season 3 or?
I certainly hope so.
Yep.
I as I understand, season 2's done pretty well, and obviously the better it does, the more likely they will be that we can do a season 3. I've got a pitch, I've got an idea, I've got a team, so we are ready to go, as it were. But
cool, right.
I'd say obviously whatever support we can get to make that happen, brilliant. So like, yeah, if you want to see more Pride, like buy Pride, buy Acceptable Losses as well, because maybe they might go like, hey, this guy's blow it up, we should do more books with him. So yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, that's
I've got a pitch, I've got an idea, and I think it would be a very timely idea. It would be very different to what Pride's done before.
Okay.
And it could even be a little controversial, but like not in a kind of courting controversy for controversy's sake kind of way, just in a case of there would be a lot of interest and discussion around it. Cool. I think I would love to do Pride season 3. I've got my idea. I know what I want to do. So fingers crossed we can make it happen. And in terms of other things, I don't have much I can say on it at the moment, but certainly let me just say keep an eye out for the name Glitter Vipers.
Okay.
Which, you know, that will be fun. That's something I'm working on at the moment. So that will probably be self-published.
Okay.
And probably be coming to Kickstarter in the near future.
Okay.
And the big thing at the moment is I'm actually currently working on print editions for Acceptable Losses, which were part of the Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we're just getting those both sorted, getting those ready to head to the presses, getting the money together, and then off it goes to print, and then we can get those out.
Cool. So I think that's covers everything I had regarding your projects. My other kind of wrapping up question was, so what have you been reading at the moment? What have you been enjoying, and what would you recommend to comic book readers out there?
I have been reading everything, because I'm a bad comic reader, in the sense of like I will read everything, even sometimes when I don't necessarily love it. But I've got to keep up with that continuity.
That's right.
But the big one, Immortal Hulk, is absolutely amazing.
It's been really good so far.
That this is coming out from Marvel, it astounds me.
Yeah.
Because like this feels like an indie horror book done in such a brilliant way. So yeah, Immortal Hulk would be a big one. I'm loving a lot of the stuff coming out of Boom lately.
I think that's
like
fair.
Alienated, which I just read the issue.
Really good first issue.
Oh my god, it's like absolutely amazing. The same with Something Is Killing the Children and Once and Future. Like literally, they have been hitting it out of the park lately. Vault are the same. Anything Vault, pretty much like give it to me, plug it straight into my veins. I just love that stuff. Vault, seriously, hire me. It's like any books they do have been absolutely amazing.
I think
so. It's been kind of like that. It's weird. It's been a little bit like that lately. Like looking at publishers, who's releasing the good stuff lately.
Yeah.
Not to say that like DC and Marvel aren't releasing good stuff too. Like there is good stuff there, but like it feels like almost everything coming out from certain other publishers is absolutely mind-blowingly fantastic. So Vault and Boom have been big ones on my lists lately.
Yeah, that's fair.
Image has got a few good books out, but like there's nothing really which I've been as obsessively reading as I used to Wictive. So like Wictive ended, and I'm like, I'm still waiting for my next big Image book. Yeah. Like there's some nice ones, but there's some good ones. Like Undiscovered Country's been pretty good. Yeah. That's been interesting. It's been nice to see Snyder and Saul work together.
Yeah, for me at the moment, Image, I'm all about Redneck. Redneck's really, really good.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think it feels like kind of a lot of the...
Donnie's got some new Image books coming as well. So, like, they're probably going to be good. So
yeah, probably. I mean, his Marvel work's been really, really good as well.
I would have to say that, because I'll tell you something. Good. Like, I read Venom from Donnie, and honest to God, I never liked the character of Venom.
Yeah, it's such a good new take on Venom.
Absolutely. Like, I never cared about Venom. I always thought he was such a 90s idea.
And he is,
and he still is, but he does it in such a way where I'm just like, seriously, why do I care now? Like, it's made by camera. But similarly, the same with Al Ewing and Hulk. Like, I never bought a Hulk, or Immortal Hulk, because the character never appealed to me. Like, he appeals to me, but like never on his solo books. Like,
that's fair.
You know, because there are some great solo runs there. There's but I don't know. I picked up Immortal Hulk, and it was just something else. You know, and it just
immediately good.
About a character which was not my character, kind of thing. It happens now and then, because like Tom Taylor's Spider-Man run was fantastic. It should never have ended, because that was the only Spider-Man book I pick up which is a Peter Parker Spider-Man book. Miles Morales Spider-Man's great.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's different. It's interesting. It says something new. Like for me, generally, when people ask like, do I like Spidey or something, I'm just generally like, no, not really. It feels like we've kind of said everything we can with the character, and anything which was interesting to say with the character was said, and we've just gone back on it. Yeah. So for me, like the Spider-Man I'm interested in, like Miles Morales, or when someone does do something interesting with Spider-Man, like Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, and the Spider-Man book which Tom Taylor wrote, because both were fantastic. Zdarsky wrote a Spider-Man issue which made me fucking cry. I'm just like, what the hell, man?
I think some of my favorite Spider-Man and Spider titles recently have all been kind of the less mainstream. So I think Tom Taylor,
amazing, basically.
Maybe. I mean, Renew Your Vows was really good, and Silk was really good as a character. Spider-Woman, Spider-Gwen, everything. Yeah, everything non-Peter Parker, unfortunately.
Which is so weird, because like I love Peter Parker as a character in other media.
Yeah, so in the films, he's
probably
great.
One of my favorite characters in the MCU.
Yeah.
And I absolutely adore Spider-Man films, but I don't like Spider-Man books generally. It's super weird.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I know a lot of people with that kind of opinion, so it's an interesting one. Going back to what you said about Image and Vault, and I think it seems like a lot of titles that would have been on Image in previous years have kind of moved over to Vault or Boom or Aftershock, and
I think
it's an interesting one.
It's very hard to compete, I think, at Image when Image have some very big name creators there.
Yes, that's true.
And it's very hard to compete with their books, which I don't like the idea of comics being a competition. I like it. Like we're all creators. We're all trying to tell stories, and we all want everyone to do well. But the audience also has a finite supply of money.
Of course, yeah.
And comics cost. So Image books, I find, are a bit more difficult to succeed when the people you are releasing books against from that same publisher are like huge comic book writers who are, granted, telling great stories, telling their own stories and telling exciting things too, but it's hard to compete with them. Whereas when you're working with someone like Vault or anything like that, they are primarily focusing on looking for the new voices and the people who have something different and new to say. So they are just, as a result, much easier to, and probably much more successful for those newer writers and those people who aren't, a big Batman long time runner like Scott Snyder. Like, I love him, love his work, but like it's hard to have a book out which is on the market the same day as a book by him, I guess. And I think Image has that slight problem, is that they've gone from somewhere where you would find new creators, new voices, to somewhere you would find the big creators telling their own stories, which absolutely has a place. But it means that a lot of new creators are now looking for other avenues because it's very hard to compete with those big guys, Yeah, I think that's fair. Unfortunately, it is primarily guys because this is how comics works. We give all the comics to 7 people, primarily white men. But yeah.
I think that's fair. And I think Vault has had a good, just a good representation all across the characters that they've put forward. So it's a lot of different stories, a lot of different protagonists you don't often see, which is nice. And I think titles like I think it was for me, Money Shot is just incredible, and there's been a lot of
fantastic as well.
And stuff like Vagrant Queen has been really good.
I can't wait for that TV show. That trailer,
I'm looking forward to it. There's just so many Vault titles that and this was really great. So good job, everyone.
Friendo.
Yeah, Friendo was good.
Friendo, bloody hell.
Insane.
It was just seeing books like this coming out, and you just like, for me as a creator, it just makes me feel like I want to be there. I want to be among, I want to be where the pretty people are, and just this is what I want. I just want to make stuff with these exciting people, who are doing exciting things, and it feels like a lot of those exciting people and exciting things are now taking part in the smaller publishers like Vault and Boom and who else is really good lately? I think there's just loads out there. I mean, I would happily work with pretty much any publisher. So like anyone who wants me to tell a story, I will work with. But yes, the people putting out those really great books are ones. So I'm obviously like, that's what I'm zoning in on.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think I've realized kind of as time's gone that my taste has shifted so much between the big two, Image, Vault. I think you end up being all over the place the more you look for what you want from storytelling rather
I'd say
than...
as well these days, Image books, I tend to be a trade waiter with Image books.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Wicked was coming out. I had to get the issue. It was the first thing I read every week that it came out. I also buy the great big hardcovers when they come out because my god, those things are beautiful. And I'm still saying that if they don't do that for final collection as black foil on a black cover, like there's nothing more Kieran and Jamie than that idea to me. So that is where that should go. But anyway, so I spent like ridiculous money on that because I'm buying the singles and I'm buying these huge collections.
I've done the same thing with Descender, so I completely understand.
But like then most other Image books, I just find myself, sometimes I'll pick up a single issue and then I have to think like, you know what, I'm going to wait for trade because I think the story's going to work better in 6-issue chunks.
That's fair. I think it's true of a lot of stories.
I think the only other time I did it with an Image book where I got the single issues, but then also bought the trade and then the hardcover was the Luther Strode series.
It's a really good series.
Because the art on that, the story was fantastic, but the art on that series was out of this world, and just like it was telling action sequences in the comics format in such an interesting way that I have not seen anyone else quite replicate since. So anything Tradmore does, I'm there.
Yeah, that's totally fair.
New World was a good one too as well. Actually, I did pick up New World single issues too.
Okay, yeah.
Because that was a great series.
So yeah, no, that's some pretty solid recommendations.
Yeah, I just feel as I'm just waffling on recommendations now, just like but.
It's easy to do, but it's been great talking to you about comics in general and the Pride and everything that you do. And so thank you for joining me for
awesome.
this one.
Thanks for having me on.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you once again to Joe Glass for chatting with me. And if you haven't already, check out the Pride, Stiffs and Acceptable Losses, which are all available over on Comixology. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, please check out our weekly show, which is available through Fab Radio International, Mixcloud, Spotify, and Anchor, as well as all good streaming services. We've got a Facebook group, which is Pull or Pass Radio Show, and we're available on Twitter at Pull or Pass. Thank you for listening.